We're going to introduce ourselves a little bit. Barb and I have been married 52 years, be 53 years in June. God's given us 4 kids. They're all grown, all serving the Lord in various ways. Our oldest daughter's a missionary in Peru, Iquitos, Peru. She has 2 little girls. She's the oldest, but she was the last one to get married. That's a whole other story. But they have a 9-year-old and a 10-year-old. It's going to be 10 and 11. And one of them just had a birthday. The other one's going to have a birthday soon. So then we have 12 grandkids altogether. God's blessed us. But our kids are scattered all over. My son's a student ministries pastor in Pennsylvania. My middle daughter, his twin sister, is a teacher in a school, preschool teacher, kindergarten teacher rather, in public school in Houston, Texas. And then my youngest daughter teaches in a Christian school in Ohio. She has 3 boys. My middle daughter has 4 kids, 2 and 2. And so God's blessed us. We're very thankful for our family. John the Apostle said, I have no greater joy than to hear that my children walk in truth. I was a pastor for almost 30 years. Then I joined the staff of New Yorkers for Constitutional Freedom. You may know Dwayne Motley. That's who I worked alongside for several years. 2014, I started my own ministry called Arise Ministry, and that's what we're doing today. Part of that time, I was the director of the New York Association of Christian Schools. Basically, to fulfill our ministry is primarily one of encouragement. It's also one of education. I do America's Christian Heritage seminars. I do other workshops, that kind of thing. I preach at mission conferences occasionally. Mostly I'm in pulpits each week. Generally about 60 churches during the year. I also preach in Bible conferences, some other things of that nature. We publish materials. There are 25 topics on the back table. They're not really tracts, not designed to give out to other people. They're designed for God's people to be informed. The Bible says, my people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. And so our goal is to give you the ammunition you need to answer people for things that come up. So of the topics, global warming, gay marriage, abortion, there's all, you'll find plenty of things to look at. Those are all free. We do ask that you read it, not just take it and use it, line the bird feeder. But those are all free. We live by faith. I also publish a newsletter once a week. I take one main story from the news, give a biblical perspective about it, and then I also give a little brief update on what's happening in the state and what's happening in Washington as well. A lot of things happening. In fact, the last few weeks, I've had to really restrict what I share because it would be too long. If you sign up for it, that's free as well. It only comes by email. If you sign up for it, it will come from Daryl Zigafus. Daryl is 80 years old and helps me with this. He's the one that keeps track of all the names and addresses. He's the one that edits it for me and then sends it out. So he keeps busy. Third thing we do is partner with pastors. I work with pastors around the state. God's been very good to us in developing a network of pastors that love the Lord and want to serve him. Well, let's talk about cascading crises. Our country is in trouble right now. If you haven't figured that out, you're probably not paying attention. Now, I remind you right at the start, God's still on the throne. And I believe some of what's happening to us is God's judgment on America. God has not taken his hand off America. If he did, we wouldn't be here. You and I can gather today. We don't have to worry about the secret police coming in or one of you being a secret policeman going to arrest me or the pastor after we finish today. But we are facing a lot of trouble. When Joe Biden was inaugurated as president, he said the country was facing 6 cascading crises. I would agree with him on 5 of the 6. I would put the 6th one as a crisis as well because of how we're reacting to it. But my perspective would be totally different than his as to why these are problems. Number 1 was COVID-19, and I would agree with him on that. COVID certainly was a major blow to the United States. 1 million Americans were killed. It had a big impact on our economy. It had a huge impact on education. I'm on the Education Commissioners Advisory Council for Religious and Independent Schools. I always have a hard time saying all of that. Anyway, they tell me at State Ed Department, they estimate our kids are about 2 years behind in their education because of COVID. It really hurt a lot of our kids. And of course, it has still had an impact on our economy. We're still recovering from some of that. Just this last week, the president announced that the pandemic is over. Now, a lot of people thought it was over before that. COVID-19 is still around. It's still, people are still getting it, but as far as the pandemic, the numbers are considered to be down, so it's no longer a pandemic. But we are still facing a lot of difficulties with it. Number 2 on the president's list was climate change. This is driving the agenda both in Albany and in Washington. We're spending billions of dollars to fight climate change, and I don't think we're going to have an impact on it at all. For instance, this week, the president announced that he wants 2/3 of all new cars to be electric cars by 2027. Well, right now it's about 6% of the car sales are electric. And the reason for that is, number 1, they're too expensive. Number 2, there are a lot of problems with it. They're not talking about some of the problems, but there are some major problems, such as the things catch on fire sometimes. And there's not enough charging stations, etc. The hypocrisy of the left is unbelievable. This is John Kerry, our climate czar. John Kerry wants you to live a simpler life, but he lives in mansions, flies around in private jets, and has more than one car. They just don't connect the two, that they should simplify their life as well. He actually said a couple of years ago that we only had X number of time left. The Chicken Little story, you remember that story? Is what comes to mind when I hear a lot of the climate change. I have 2 questions on climate change. Number 1, is it real? And I don't think so. Number 2, are we responsible? I think it's called weather. And they have a hard time predicting what it's going to be next week, let alone what it's going to be 100 years from now. All of the scale models, all the computer, garbage in, garbage out. There's just all kinds of refutation on this. But the party line is climate change. We got to fight it. We're going to all die. We're all going to, unless we stop driving these gas guzzling cars. And well, I think some of it's downright silly. Well, anyway, what does the Bible say about climate? Well, this is the promise that was given to Noah. While the earth remaineth, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, and night shall not cease. God's promised to take care of it. What will we do if the climate gets warmer by what's projected? We'll adjust. If this last week was climate change, I want you to know I'm for it. I'll vote for it if we can vote on it. Anyway, I just don't, I think it has more to do with the sun. I think it has to do with seasons. We've had in the 70s, I remember they were warning about a polar freeze. They said, Al Gore made predictions about all the polar bears would be extinct and the polar caps would be melted. The polar caps are bigger today than they were when he said that. So it just doesn't work out. Growing inequality is the third thing that the president mentioned is a cascading crisis. And this has really exploded. It was only 2015 that Bruce Jenner came out of the closet and said he was changing his gender. And since then, it's become a wave. It's become popular. I was in a church in North Tonawanda, Lighthouse Baptist in North Tonawanda, a few weeks ago, and 2 teachers came up. I had a presentation just on gender, and 2 teachers came up and said, "Tom, this is worse in our schools than you think. This is pandemic." And they both taught in elementary. Kids want to change their gender because that's the in thing to do, and kids are being indoctrinated with this. Part of what's in the news is that male athletes who are mediocre in playing with men are coming over to the women's side and winning championships. This is Leah Thomas, who's won a lot of the swimming championships. There is a bill called the Equality Bill. I'd call it the Inequality Bill, but when it was done, Congressman Gary Stubbs said on the floor of the House, "The gender confusion that exists in our culture today is a clear rejection of God's good design. Whenever a nation's laws no longer reflect the standards of God, that nation is in rebellion against him and will invariably bear the consequences. We are seeing the consequences of rejecting God here in our country today." I think that's a very good statement. However, Jerry Nadler, who's congressman from New York City, jumped to his feet immediately and said, "What any religious tradition describes as God's will is of no concern to this Congress. Now think about that. We don't care what God says. Now, if I were God, he'd just be a pile of ashes. That'd be it. But God's more patient than I am. What do we believe about equality? You ought to have some understanding of that. Number one, all men and women are created in the image and likeness of God, therefore have worth and value. All men and women are assigned their respective gender at conception. All men and women are loved by God, and all men and women should be treated with dignity and respect. I'm not for bullying. I'm not for picking on people. But the fact is, you cannot change your gender. You are what you are. You were born a male, you will die a male. You can change your complexion, you can change your dress, you can have surgery, but you can't change your DNA. It's either XX or XY. You're either male or female. That'd be the way it is till you die. So what happens is we have masculine, masculinized women and feminized men. That's what we have. And these people are to be pitied because they're confused. If you don't know what your gender is, you're a confused individual, and I think deserve pity. Number 4 on the president's list was racism. Racism was almost dead in this country. I think it was Tom Stiles who said, if not dead, it was on life support. However, the fans were flamed again with the death of George Floyd in 2020. That led to riots all over the country. The philosophy behind that is called critical race theory. And the movement that's really pushing this is Black Lives Matter. Now, they've been discredited. The 4 women that started that, 3 women that started it, rather, 2 of them are confessed Marxists. They're communists. One is a lesbian. They actually ended up being multimillionaires, all of them, and now are under investigation by the IRS. There are a lot of groups that identify with Black Lives Matter, but have nothing to do with the actual organization. But if you read their doctoral statement, they had a doctoral statement, it was online. I don't think you can get it now. They basically say part of what they want to do is get rid of the nuclear family, father, mother, kids. They think that's a bad thing. When what they're doing is they're actually rejecting the one thing that can save the black family or any other family. Critical race theory has been around since the 70s. This is the main book or textbook on it. There's a lot of books you could read on it. There is a brochure on the back table on critical race theory. I'd encourage you to get it so you're familiar with what it says. Basically, white children are being told they're oppressors, and black and brown children are being told that they've been oppressed. That life is unfair. It will always be unfair. You can't really make it without help from the government. I think that's a horrible thing to tell little kids. I don't think little kids are racist by nature. Tony Saxon, you know Tony? Tony Saxon, you don't know Tony? Some of you do. All right, Tony Saxon's big guy from the inner city. I tell him he's New York's foremost New York black evangelist. Of course, he's also the only black evangelist I know. But Tony, a number of years ago, adopted me as his brother and said, "You're my big brother." And so since then, he calls me his big brother. We were in the church together, which is unusual. I spoke. He came in late during Sunday school. We had a whole bunch of little kids in the front. And Tony came in late, and I invited him to come on up, and I introduced him. And I said, "You know anything different between us?" And one little boy in the front said, "Yeah, he's bigger than you are." He did not notice the color at all. And that's kind of the natural state. When I was a kid, I learned red, yellow, black, and white. They are precious in his sight. And whether you're black, brown, green, doesn't matter. God loves you anyway. America's standing in the world was number 5. And what the president was doing is he was critical of President Trump. I think it's gotten much worse under President Biden. I think our enemies no longer fear us, and our friends are not sure they can trust us. We took a major hit when we withdrew from Afghanistan because we left people behind that were helping us. Our enemies are not afraid of us. Russia invaded Ukraine. China is making moves in the Middle East, in fact, all over the world. Our standing has definitely been diminished, and there's just no question about that. President's sick. Number 6 was attack on the truth. And he was critical of false information being on Facebook, but anything critical, particularly about um, the vaccine or any of that kind of stuff. We are living in a time of unprecedented censorship. We've never seen anything like this in America, where if you put the wrong thing on Facebook, you end up in Facebook jail, as they call it, or you'll be banned, or it's being censored. Since Elon Musk has bought Twitter, we're finding out that they deliberately worked with the government to kill stories to make sure you didn't get it. We now know that Google and other search engines deliberately move you to liberal sites, not conservative sites, when they can, to direct your thought. We're being controlled by the media. Attack on the truth. Black Lives Matter did a lot of strange things. One of them, this is a statue in Washington, D.C. that they defaced to try to tear down. It was actually paid for by freed slaves in appreciation for Abraham Lincoln. It pictures a slave having his chains broken and who's rising to his feet. It was actually a tribute to President Lincoln, and that they're destroying it. But what's happening in this, we're destroying our history, forgetting our history. Confederate soldiers like Lee and Jackson, who are great Christian gentlemen, are being described in horrible terms as though they were racist. Racism was a problem, both the North and South, but it's a sad thing that they went from the Confederates to now the Revolutionary, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson. Schools are changing their names because they don't want to be associated with men like Thomas Jefferson or George Washington. What a shame. We're losing our country and our heritage. Well, Jesus said, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." The series of booklets or pamphlets that I've written is called The Truth About. So it's the truth about abortion, truth about gambling, truth about whatever. Um, because truth is on our side. Time is always on the side of truth, always on the side of right. So if we have the truth, we need to share the truth. Now, I added some things to the president's list. I added 6. He had 6, I added 6 more. I would put abortion as being right near the top. The lady mentioned the abortion pill. That abortion pill's been around for several years. In fact, the Alan Gutmeyer Institute estimates that more than half of all abortions in the United States are the pill, called the morning after. One pill in particular was a group of pro-lifers took it to court. The federal judge ruled against the pill, saying that the FDA had not followed its normal procedures. They had rushed it through, saying that it was necessary. They have an exception to their normal procedures in the case of a terminal disease. Well, pregnancy is not a disease, and it's certainly not terminal. So that's the question. Now, the Supreme Court, another judge, said they could still make it available with some restrictions, and then the Supreme Court just Friday said we're gonna let it still be sold until we can hear the case. So it'll work its way through the lower courts, then finally get to the Supreme Court when they'll make a decision. We are aborting approximately approximately 1.2 million abortions per year. Nobody actually knows the total number. There are only 2 sources of information: the Alan Gutmeyer Institute, which is related to Planned Parenthood, and those folks have been known to lie. And the other one is the Center for Disease Control, and some states, including California, do not report. Plus, we have no idea on the morning after pill. Like Gutmeyer Institute says half of them are that way. So I've heard people say we've saved thousands of lives since Roe v. Wade was overturned. It was overturned, but that just meant it went back to the states. It didn't legalize it anywhere or didn't ban it anywhere. It just meant the states have to make their decision. Unfortunately, New York is on the wrong side of this issue. We were one of the first states in the union to legalize abortion before the Supreme Court. It is embedded now in our law that a woman has a right to terminate her pregnancy or determine the outcome of her pregnancy, is the way they word it. Governor Hochul would like to put that as a constitutional amendment. I'm praying that that does not happen. But this is a horrible thing. We're killing off all these babies. And, Social Security is in trouble. You know why? Well, a lot of young people that should be working, paying into it, being aborted. That's part of the problem. The economy is hurting because it's somewhere around 63 million babies that have been aborted since 1973. That's a horrible statistic, and the slaughter continues. If the blood of Abel cried out to God, what about the blood of 63 million babies? You know, uh, Thomas Jefferson, when he talked about slavery, said when he thought about it, he had concern for his country. He said, "I tremble because God is just. His justice will not sleep forever." Border crisis is a huge problem. I would call it a crisis. Uh, over 5 million illegal immigrants have come across the border since President Biden was inaugurated. They came across at a rate of over 200,000 last month. The numbers for March, I don't think, are in, so that's probably February. They're coming over by the hordes. And again, the hypocrisy of the left is seen that all these sanctuary cities said, we are sanctuary city. They can come here. We'll take care of them. Don't worry. When the governor of Texas and Florida started sending them by bus to those cities, they started yelling and screaming. Mayor of New York City, Eric Adams, says there are over 40,000 immigrants that have come in. Undocumented, they call them. They don't call them illegals. Undocumented immigrants are there. And how are they taking care of them? Have you read this stuff? They're putting them up in motels. They're trashing the motels. They're feeding them 3 square because they can't work. They have to have welfare. Governor Hochul has a bill in the legislature right now that would give them free medical care. Um, you know, you can't absorb this. I mean, you can't take these many people in without having serious consequences, and they're flooding in. Crime is a huge problem in the United States. We elected last year 70 prosecutors or district attorneys that were backed by Soros. These prosecutors are redefining what they will prosecute. Now, a prosecutor has a lot of discretion whether they prosecute a case or not prosecute a case, but they are supposed to enforce the law. And some of these prosecutors have just taken whole lists of things and said, we're no longer going to jail people for this. Then in New York State and other places around the country, we have changed the bail laws. Bail used to be designed that when you were arrested, you had to put up bail money. You go through a bail's bondsman, it cost 10%, but a bail would be set, and that was to ensure that you would show up in court. Well, liberals have said that's unfair to poor people. So what we need to do is do away with that. So now criminals are being arrested, taken down to the police station, booked, and released with a promise to come back. And as a result, we have a revolving door. Our system needs work. There should not be long delays. Did you know there are people still in jail from what happened January 26, 21? Waiting. What? January 6th. The so-called insurrection. They still haven't been brought to trial. You should have a right, it's a constitutional right to a speedy trial. So we should speed it up, but we're doing strange things, and as a result, crime is just flourishing. For instance, in some states, they will not prosecute, some cities, they won't prosecute a person who shoplifts if it's less than $900. Well, a number of stores are just moving out. There's a Walmart here in town that says they're losing $2 million a month in shoplifting. Well, a store cannot absorb that. So what's going to happen? It's only a matter of time. They're going to close that one down. And what's happening in the inner cities are drugstores are closing, and then people don't have access to medication they need. So crime is a serious problem. War drums are sounding. In fact, this last week, there was a general who actually said, we are technically at war with Russia right now. You heard this last week about these secret documents that were released. 21-year-old National Guardsman somehow had top secret clearance, got a hold of secret documents. Apparently, there's a lot of stuff in there that they're focusing on the fact that he took them, but apparently there's a lot of stuff in there that is very damaging to the United States. For instance, the United States and our allies have troops fighting in Ukraine. Congress has not authorized that. So there's a violation. We are spying on our allies. That's not a surprise. They've done that for a long time. But strategies in Ukraine, for instance, are being reported. The war in Ukraine is not going well for the Ukrainians. In spite of what you hear in the news, the people are suffering greatly. Russia has attacked infrastructure, so people are without heat, without food. It's a desperate situation. Russia has lots of men; they can keep pouring them in, and that's what they're doing. They've had tremendous numbers of casualties, but Russia is on the move. Putin wants to reestablish the old Soviet Union. China is on the move all over the world. Just this last week, it was announced that China and Brazil have come to an agreement. China's investing heavily in Africa and in South America. They are expanding in Asia as well. They're building false islands. They're building up their military. They want to be the dominant power, and they see the United States as the enemy. North Korea is developing nuclear weapons and shooting off intercontinental missiles. They're aiming toward Hawaii, but they could hit the United States with some of those. And Iran is developing nuclear weapons. I don't think Israel will let them do that. There'll be a bombing raid soon, I think, or some kind of something will happen. But what's happening is these enemies are not afraid of us anymore. I'd consider it a crisis. We're headed toward war. I've actually heard congressmen saying, we need to go and teach those Chinese a lesson. Well, listen, war would be a very bad thing. And it's not real clear that we'd win. So, war drums. The national debt and inflation, $31.4 trillion in debt. That means our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren will be paying for this thing. The problem is we've put everything on a credit card all of my life. Every war has been on a credit card. We are spending now $2 trillion a year more than we're taking in. You cannot sustain that. You can't continue doing that without something giving. So what does government do? Government's printing more money. When government prints more money, what happens? You have inflation. So you're facing inflation right now. It's down a little bit from where it was. It was 9% last year. It's estimated right now to be 5%. My wife has been keeping a running score for me on the price of eggs. I'm not sure that's not the only grocery she buys, but eggs are the one that stands out. And they're down a little bit this week. Gas went back up this week. Did you notice that? And we're paying for our government spending too much money. The problem is not that they don't collect enough money. They collect plenty. Yesterday, or actually tomorrow's tax day. Is when your tax, actually the 18th this year, because Boston has a holiday called Patriots Day, day after the day of taxes. And since it was on Saturday, you celebrate on Monday, so Tuesday's the day. But, I filled out my income tax. Always hate to send that in. So it's always a job I hate. And the Bible says, be thankful for everything. All right, Lord, how can I be thankful in this? Well, I'm thankful I'm paying taxes and have the money to pay the taxes. Secondly, I'm thankful I'm paying to the United States, not to China or Cuba, some other nation in the world. We're paying to where we'll have at least the freedom we have. But this is a serious problem. Now, Congress periodically sets a limit. Right now, the limit is 31.4. We blew by that 2 months ago. And they're stretching the budget. They're doing what they can to keep it covered. They will announce probably probably by June, they'll announce an extender again, and they'll just keep raising it. So this is the debt. Can't go any farther. We hit that, we'll raise it up. So it's you spending all your credit cards and coming home to your wife and say, dear, we've had a problem. We've spent all of our limit, but don't worry, I fixed it. I raised our credit limit. It doesn't solve the problem. It just makes the problem a little bit worse. Neither side is really dealing with this. This should be a major issue, but neither side's really talking about it. Right now, the New York State is negotiating a budget. The legislature's been on vacation, spring break for 2 weeks. They They come back tomorrow. They've had two extenders. The budget was due April the 1st, which I've always thought is a good day for the budget to be due. It's based on how much income. Our state budget says, a constitution says, that our spending has to equal our income. So we have to have a balanced budget. The problem is it's based on an estimate. So both sides estimate what the money coming in will be, and then they spend it. And do they ever? 27 point something billion dollars this year. That's the governor's budget. The legislature would like to spend more, and they have some disagreements. Governor Hochul would like to change the bail reform laws to give judges a little more discretion. That would be a good thing. Progressives are against it. Right now, our legislature is composed of 2/3 Democrats to 1/3 Republicans, both houses. So that means there's about 107 to 43 in the Senate, or no, that's not right, in the Assembly. It's something like 43, 22, I think, in the House. So that means the chairman of both houses, or the Speaker of the House, or the Senate Majority Leader are Democrats. They appoint all the chairmen of all the committees, so they're all Democrats. Every committee is composed in direct relationship to the population, representation in the body. So it's 2 Democrats to every 1 Republican on every committee. So the legislature is way to the left. But the Democrats are divided right now. There's 2 groups. One, the moderate, which I wouldn't call moderate, I'd call them liberal. And the other ones that are liberals are progressives, very progressive. In fact, they're communist. That's what they are. Some of them are open Marxists. They'll say that. And they're fighting. That's why there's a delay on the budget. So when you read some of the stuff in the paper, you'll know what's going on. It's actually Democrat versus Democrat. Republicans can jump up and down. They can yell. They can have press conferences. They can put bills in, but their bills aren't going to go anywhere. It's the Democrats are running everything, and they're not getting along with each other, which may be a good thing for us. Here's number 12, and this is the bottom line. America's in trouble because it's a spiritual crisis. America is forgetting God. And as a result of that, we're rejecting his way, and we're reaping the consequences of those actions. We're seeing a breakdown of families. We're seeing a breakdown of faith. Church attendance is down across the country. Why is that? Why have we forgotten God? Well, you could put it to a lot of different things, but basically, 1963, the Supreme Court removed God from the public schools with prayer and Bible reading. And we have a generation now that have grown up with an education that doesn't teach that there's a God in heaven. I'm thankful for public school teachers that are trying to hold the line, but they're really swimming against the stream. We are facing these crises. Have you ever been in the ocean swimming when a wave hits you and knocks you down? And as you're trying to get up, a second wave hits you and knocks you down? You can get in trouble real quick in the ocean because those waves will come one after another. That's what's happening to America right now. When Barb and I first moved to Rochester, we went to the Greece Mall at Christmas time. And as we were walking around shopping, she was somewhere else, I was another part, suddenly fire alarms went off. And we're new in Rochester, and I'm looking around, and nobody's moving. Now, I had been an administrator of a school. When the fire alarm goes off, you get outside the building, right? But nobody's paying any attention. They just walk around. And I kind of think that's what's going on now. The alarms are ringing, but nobody's listening. Nobody's paying attention. Tony Blair said that 9/11 was a wake-up call. The problem is the world rolled over and went back to sleep. That's where we're at today. America needs to return to God. And the only way that's going to happen is if we have a national revival. And revival can't begin in the White House. It can't begin in the Congress. Revival has to begin in the church house. And a little more importantly, it has to begin in your house. It has to begin in your heart. When you and I get serious with God, then revival can begin. But until then, America's in trouble. We're like blind groping in darkness. We just lost our way. And we need to have leaders that will rise up and say, this is the way. But our hope is not in the White House. Our hope is not in Congress. Our hope is in the Lord Jesus Christ. He's the one. I think COVID was somewhat of a warm-up for the Antichrist. Every time I saw a sign on a window that said no mask, no service, I thought, so all they have to do is change that S to an R. No mark, no service. Many of the restrictions were placed on us. We lost a lot of our freedom. And our freedom's under attack today. Why is there an attack on the truth? Because the truth will expose all of this stuff. For instance, orders are coming down from the education department. The teachers have to respect the decisions of children as to what gender they are. Parents are told you should let your child decide what gender they are. What life-changing decision would you trust to an elementary student? I mean, it's absurd. If I was what I wanted to be when I was a little kid, I'd be a cowboy today. Kids don't know what they want. Most kids will outgrow it's gender confusion. They'll outgrow that. It's they're tomboys. There's always been tomboys, but they'll outgrow it. Don't worry about it. But we're asked to believe and accept the lie. We're being told to pretend. And it's time for Christians to speak the truth in love. We need to be genuine men and women of God. Before God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, he told Abraham what he was going to do. And Abraham said, Lord, you wouldn't destroy it if there were 50 righteous, would you? And then he negotiated. What about 40, 30, 10? There are 10 righteous. Would you spare the city? And God said he would. Before he judged Judah, God said to Ezekiel, I look for a man to stand in the gap and take up the hedge. But I found none. Today, if God looks down from heaven at New York, will he find some righteous men? Men that are willing to stand up and take up the hedge? I pray that you're one. Heavenly Father, thank you